Hello, everybody. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, about to be joined by Ken Wiebe from Winnipeg Free Press. Together, we are Kenny and Renny. This is a special edition of the Kenny and Renny Show. Listen, we saw it. We saw up in the air, they got the bat signal in Gotham. We've got the K&R signal that goes up into the sky when we feel like you need us the most, or when some of you feel like you need us the most. And I don't know who's got the keys to that thing or who keeps turning on, but there you go. When it gets turned on, we listen. We try to make sure we get in and, provide you with a little bit of value or a little bit of conversation, whatever you feel you need in this situation. So sorry we didn't give you more of a heads up. We were trying to make this work. Ken is literally landing in Ottawa right now. He's been in travel hell for a day. He was supposed to be about an hour and a half behind me yesterday leaving Ottawa. I got out. He didn't. I didn't realize the window was closing right after I left, but he's going to join us when he can from the airport in Toronto, where he is connecting now before he comes to Winnipeg. We had a tiny little window to get this done, so I built the show, and we're here. And we think it's an important day to have a conversation about this. And I thought it was very fitting. The very first comment in this show, Russ Lowen, who, I'm not surprised to see him being the first guy popping into this show here, says, this is as unexpected as Chevy answering any questions. And one of the reasons we thought that this was important to have this conversation is because there's a general theme about this availability by Kevin Cheveldayoff. And I think Russ Lowen is summing quite a bit of it up here in this situation. It's why I'm getting messages and people reaching out to me and having these kind of conversations. And I think it needs to be tackled. And so let me say right off the bat, there's something, and you know what? Ken has just popped in here, so he's made it off the plane. So when he is available, I'm going to bring him into the show. I can tell already he's probably having connectivity issues, the way that this camera is working in the green room. But as soon as Ken is available to go, he's going to give me the thumbs up, or he's going to pop a message into the private chat, and he's going to be in here, and then we'll bring him in. I'm going to get started. Actually, I'm going to just wait until he's ready to go before I really launch into this. Oh, he's ready to go. So guys, fellas, ladies, everybody, time to bring the man with the best music of the business. Here comes Kenny. Ken, great to see you. Great job getting ready here. The production value is not going to be high on this, but what are podcasts for if not to be light on your feet and kind of pop up where you feel that you're needed? I think that we're needed in this situation here, having this conversation. You let me know if you got to go at any point, because I know you've got travel things going on there. But let me just tell you how much again. Listen, as the world heavyweight champion,
yes, I know
delays and issues when it comes to traveling, I know what you're going through. And I know that sometimes when you're dealing with this kind of stuff, trying to get up for a show like this isn't always the easiest thing. So I want to thank you for your time here.
Thanks for having me.
We'd love to have you back at some point. If you want to come back, it would be great to see you. But I'm sure the audience themselves appreciate you making it in here. It means, I'm sure it's going to mean a lot to them. Want to launch into this. I don't know. I'm at some point going to go, and I'm going to go for a while. You want me to lead on this? All right.
I'm gonna get the promotion for folks on the old interwebs quickly, and then
okay. Good
I'm
stuff.
listening though.
Okay. I'm gonna start out by saying there's, with the things that Kevin Cheveldayoff talked about, there's one thing that I really strongly agree with him, that I think that he is handling properly and right in this whole situation. He talked a little bit about the idea of, you are where you are, things aren't very good, and you just kind of got to work your way out of it. And that, it's this idea of looking at this as an opportunity. Okay. And sometimes these opportunities don't work out the way that you want. Sometimes they don't work out with the Winnipeg Jets turning things around right now and making the playoffs. But sometimes when you're challenged the way the Winnipeg Jets are being challenged right now, when you're down the way the Winnipeg Jets are down right now, it's about how you handle these things, and the benefits and the payoff may be a year down the road, 2 years down the road, who knows? But at some point, maybe, just maybe, enduring what the Winnipeg Jets are going through right now is an opportunity. And I think Kevin Cheveldayoff talked about this as being an opportunity for the Winnipeg Jets, and they have to view it that way. And you have to keep fighting, and you have to slug your way through, and it's about how you handle these things that matter the most. And I think he's right when it comes to that. I preach those kind of things to my daughters when it comes to their sports, when it comes to their school. I try and tell them not to be afraid to lose, that losing is learning. I always say to them, if you win, great. If you lose, great, because both are opportunities to get better and going forward. And I think Kevin Cheveldayoff, basically with one of his messages, made it clear in this availability that he sees this somewhat as an opportunity for his organization, and that they should treat it as such. I agree with that 100%. The one thing I'll say is I wish that he had taken that same mindset into that avail, because what I saw in that avail is something very similar to what Russ was just talking about off the top end of the show. And it reflected in my coverage on Sportsnet. If you watch our news show today, you're going to see that I went through the tape. I went through the quotes that came out of that, and it was extremely hard to find something that was said that would be worth bringing up again to show an audience, not just a Winnipeg Jets audience, like a national audience. I mean, why is I need Kevin Cheveldayoff, in order for me to put him up as clips, to be saying something that someone in St. John's, Newfoundland finds worth listening to, a message that is going to resonate. Never mind with Winnipeg Jets fans who are tuned in, hyper-focused, and hanging on that message. And my entire story was basically the idea that we couldn't find those moments. Like, we could not find moments in this. Is, we love to take you behind the scenes. I was supposed to do a top clips tale. A top clips tale, in speak of broadcast journalism, is that I introduce a topic, I set things up, and I set it to clips. And clips are the voices of the players and the GM and whoever else. And you give them the say. It's an opportunity to give the platform to the players, to the general manager, to the coaches in situations like that, so they have an opportunity to connect. And then the tail, top clips tail, the tail part of it is me maybe summarizing it all, or maybe adding a little bit of information that was missing or whatever, and then getting out of there. We weren't able to find clips to run that would make sense with this whole thing. There was not a theme that came out of this. So what I handled in that was basically the idea that I personally, I would suggest fans walk away from this media availability with Kevin Cheveldayoff, which was an opportunity for the organization to answer questions, to connect with fans. And I think fans walk away with more questions than they walk away with answers from this. And I think that's a problem. And I think the idea that Kevin Cheveldayoff and the Jets organization is looking at this situation as an opportunity to get better, to work, to grind, to deepen their resolve. They did not, or Kevin Cheveldayoff did not handle this media availability with that same idea. And I think that he should have. This was an important moment where he could have answered certain questions like, what's your role in what's gone wrong? What's your take on what's gone wrong? Let us understand through your trained eyes what you see has unraveled here that is causing problems with the Winnipeg Jets. What's the role of the coaches in this? What's the role of the players in this? What's the role of your off-season moves in this? What's the role in your drafting record in finding this? One Ken that I thought, and we'll get into some of the very specific questions in his responses, which I think were fairly consistently non-responses, was his idea that when asked by Mike McIntyre, your colleague, why the Winnipeg Jets have not called up more Manitoba Moose throughout this issue, was the suggestion that they haven't really had the opportunities to do so. That I found baffling. I found it absolutely baffling unless you glean from that. It's not explained, but unless you glean from that the only idea that the Jets would have of providing an opportunity for someone is if they're coming in to cover off an injury. But I think that this was maybe the most okay, and I'm just going to go back quickly. This is not abnormal for the Jets organization. And it was kind of an organization-wide thing where there was just kind of a stonewalling and a non-answering of questions. And I think that used to exist with the players. And I think it's, existed with the management team for a long time. Ken, I always used to talk about how I think it used to exist with Paul Maurice when he was here. It was the old, Paul Maurice, you'd ask him about a game where they'd played terribly and he'd say, oh, I liked our game. And he would go on to kind of basically explain that to the untrained eye, it may have looked bad, but they actually were working on things and things looked good. There was a turn in the organization when Rick Bowness got to Winnipeg. And Rick Bowness, I think, had a really positive effect on the entire organization because he walked in and he started saying really bluntly the things that were obvious. And then because of that, the things that were less obvious, he had your trust with it. Because he'd go out there and if the Jets had a bad game, he'd say to you, well, you were watching the same game I was. This was a problem. This was a problem. This was a problem. And if you're asking about this, you're absolutely right to. And I feel like that accountability that he threw up front had started to bleed its way throughout the organization. I think that there was a time there where Kevin Cheveldayoff was doing better than he had traditionally done, where he basically seemed to get up on the camera, in front of the camera, and stonewall for a long time. Now, this is not me saying in any way that this is, now that he's gone, Scott Arneal's fault. I think Scott Arneal is doing a pretty darn good job. Like, Scott Arneal steps in front of the camera and he bleeds in front of the camera with every single loss. And I think he's pretty open about what's going on. There's a degree of things that you can say, but I always admired as well how Rick Bowness would say, there's nothing I can tell you right now that I haven't already said to that player already. And what to me that does is it creates an organizational wide accountability. We talk about our problems, we get them out there, and that way we're not scared to talk about the problems. I don't know if it's being scared, but there were no answers here today. And I liken it like this, Ken. I don't think this was a swing and a miss. I think this was a called strikeout where the batter refused to take the bat off his shoulders for 3 straight strikes, walked up and walked out, and there was just really not much to this at all. And the reason I think it is massively problematic is I think that this was maybe the most important opportunity Kevin Cheveldayoff has ever had in his time in Winnipeg, 15 years in Winnipeg, to connect with his audience. It's important. It's important that you do that because the Winnipeg Jets are in uncharted territory. They've never been where they are. They've never been a last place team. There's never been a team that has gone from President's Trophy winner to last in the league by the end of the year. These are extraneous circumstances that demand answers, and those answers didn't come today. And this, Ken, is why it's important. I've been on this podcast before, and I've talked, and this was addressed to a degree. I'm a true believer that if you are an NHL market, you will be there to support your team if your team's not winning. But when I say that, I want to make it abundantly clear. This is not a blank check to be written by fans that says we will continue to be in the stands no matter what because we're an NHL team. I think there has to be a give and take between the organization and the fans. And the fans need to feel this is the most important thing, Ken. I've said this before. Kevin Cheveldayoff's not accountable to me. He's not accountable to you. He's not necessarily accountable to his players, although he should be to a degree, and so on and so forth. And Mark Chipman, the same goes for him. But they are all accountable to the Winnipeg Jets fans and to their customers and to the people who buy tickets and put themselves in those seats. And like I'd said, I am a true believer that Winnipeg is a hockey town and they will support their team, win or lose, as long as they feel they're being, it's not a hockey fan question, it's a respect to your customers thing. And this was an opportunity for Kevin Cheveldayoff to connect with the fans, to show accountability to the fans, to answer the fans' questions, which our job. It's not Sean Reynolds asking a question. It's not Ken Wiebe asking a question. It's us trying to make sure we are being the voice and asking the questions that the fans have. And that's what was missing here, was a response from Kevin Cheveldayoff to say to the fans, you want to know what's gone wrong? This is what I think's gone wrong. We didn't hear that today. You want to know where we're going? This is what I can tell you about where we're going without giving away trade secrets that put me in a bad spot with other GMs. This was a long way of surviving questions in a avail that was waited on by fans for weeks, if not months, hoping to get some kind of direction, some kind of answers, some kind of reason to understand what's happening, and so it could affect how they see things going forward. And I see this as the organization taking a pass on accountability with its fans and taking a pass on bringing its fans into something when they're in a desperate, critical spot to make sure that the fans feel like they're involved, so the fans feel that they want to keep tuning in.
Yeah, I'm just going to start this way. And again, I've been involved in the majority of these 15 availabilities at midway points with Kevin Cheveldayoff, often in smaller groups on the road, which was how many of them were held previously. I wish I had been in the room today, Sean, because it feels like I'm at a disadvantage. I obviously have listened to the majority of the clips. I read all of the transcripts, but I don't have a sense of what it felt like in the room. Obviously, whether it's people in chat room, I've read everything that's online. I see the anger, I see the angst. But for me, reading the transcripts and listening to some of the clips that I have, I don't feel as strongly as you do on this situation. In the first answer, Kevin Cheveldayoff did point the finger at himself. So
hold on.
He flat out says it right here.
What does he say? He says it starts with me.
That's accountability, is it not? It starts with me.
Ken, this is what accountability looks like. Accountability, it's one thing to say this starts with me, and then when you ask what's your role in this, and there's no answer on what the role is. I asked him the question about the moves that he made in the offseason,
right,
and it was fairly a non-answer. To me, this is virtue signaling. If you say this begins with me, and then you never have a conversation about the role you have played in the organization ending up where it is, you're not really saying anything. You're not taking accountability. It's easy to say this starts with me. Well, what's your role in this? Well, I'm not going to talk about my role in this. That's not accountability. That's just standing up and saying, I own a part of this too, but I will not talk to you about what part I own or what I could have done better or what I've learned or how I'm going to respond to it. That to me, Ken, is lip service towards accountability, but it is not accountability.
Yeah, and that's why I say you are in there. You had the tone. You have the feel for what happened in that half hour. I a good bunch of experts. Be simple. Knows that reason knows that either took a. I don't understand so much, Sean, recently about the Jets aren't acting like a last place team in that people are privately saying, no, hey man, I'm playing great. It's that guy. Or how come that guy's not going better? I don't think Kevin Cheveldayoff's in here saying, hey, Scott or Neil, I gave you the best possible team to play with. It's up to you to sort this out. I think he knows that they're still looking for the second line center position that they thought they were trying to fill with Brock Nelson last March. But I don't think that Kevin sees value in. I know what you're saying. It would have been better for him to say, I need to do a better job. But I think he's using different words than what people want to hear him say. I think when he says, I continue to look at opportunities, people see that as not enough or not being bold enough. But I think if you're doing the deciphering or trying to read between the lines, I think Kevin Cheveldayoff, when he says, I'm looking for other opportunities, means that he does know that he hasn't filled those roster spots to the degree they need to be filled. Now, again, I'm not up here saying Kevin Cheveldayoff doesn't need to do more. I mean, I wrote about this on the weekend. Action needs to be taken. We've been talking about this, but I think part of this is timing wise, Sean. I know what you're saying about wanting to. I think that what today lacked was direction. But I think part of that lack of direction is because the Jets are having their pro scouting meetings where they're going to decide how deep they're going to go in terms of who is going to be shipped out here between January 6th and March 6th or whatever the date ends up being. So, but again, we also know this about Kevin Cheveldayoff. He's never going to tell you that he's trading a bunch of underperforming veterans. So again, this is not a defense. I'm just trying to, my perspective is different because, like I said, I don't feel like I had a feel for the room. And part of it is too, I mean, people want to say, well, if this lineup's not working, you need to change the lineup. Now, I totally understand that side of the equation. And you and I are on the same boat here. Solomonson needs to be playing, whether that's on January 6th or on February 6th or whenever he gets up here full time. He's going to get up here before the year is over. And I think the sooner the better. But I think there's a little bit of disconnect in the wording when it comes to, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to change the subject, but one of the other things that's been talked about on, most other programs and what is getting everyone's attention and people riled up on the old Twitter machine is that when Kevin Cheveldayoff argues that, to Connor Rabchuk's great question about, only 2 draft picks in the lineup, nobody knocking on the door. I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between fans thinking that, if Elias Solomonson can't make this lineup, that's 32nd, then he must not be ready. But the issue, Sean, is deeper than that. It's not that Solomonson's not ready for 12 minutes a game with the Jets right now. It's that the benefit of playing 22 minutes a game for another 2 weeks or a month or whatever, however long it takes to move out 1 or 2 right shot defensemen, there's value in that playing in every role rather than just being shuffled in to a third pairing role at the NHL level for a team that's struggling. So anyways, that's just one of the other things that stood out to me from the listening part. But hey, I'm with you. I mean, we love transparency. We would love general managers to lay out the plan. I just, based on what I've seen in the 15 other ones of these, I didn't see, again, like I said, part of it is probably because it wasn't in the room, but I didn't see this one being as, I didn't see as much missing. But Sean, I do agree with you. There was a stretch maybe when Rick, I don't think it was a coincidence, when Rick Bowness showed up here, that started a time when Kevin Cheveldayoff was a little bit more revealing himself in those scenarios. But I think part of that reason is because the Jets were obviously doing better at those times. So quite frankly, it's Kevin Cheveldayoff's never been in last place in the NHL. And maybe there was a little bit of holding back in that scenario, but I think it had more to do with not being in that situation before than wanting to withhold or missing out on the opportunity, Sean. Because I agree with you. I mean, it needed to go further. I'm with you 100%. I just don't know that it's in Kevin Cheveldayoff's personality to be as revealing as the fan base wanted him to be. And I'm not saying that's the right move. I'm just saying that that's the evidence from the 15 previous years even though there's been some moving forward in terms of him being a little bit more open, he hasn't been overly open, even in those years where he was more open than in the past.
So I would suggest this, like, you're right when you say, like, this is just a continuation for the most part of what we know and how the organization has gone.
And that's what you're saying. That's the miss, right? That's part of where he missed.
Well, exactly. But beyond that, Ken, a chance to show more, but there's being, there's being stuck in your ways and there's being obstinate. Okay. And would you not agree or tackle the idea that if there was a year to step out of your skin and go beyond what you've done in the past, that this is that moment?
Sure. No. And that's so interesting, right? Because like you said, the media's been waiting for this opportunity. Fan base is kind of at the edge of their seats, wondering when it's going to be. We find out on Sunday night. The press conference is going to be Monday morning. Obviously, Kevin Cheveldayoff knows the score. I mean, as he pointed out, they know what the record is, and they know it's not nearly good enough. And again, the question was, questions from the wording from Kelly Moore was, is it fair to say it's an unmitigated disaster? At the end of the answer, Kevin Cheveldayoff used predicament, which is just a lighter version of unmitigated disaster, right? They know that being in last place is more than a predicament, but we both been around businesses, this business long enough to know, it's spin to a degree, but he knows the harshness of the scenario. So anyways, I do think that at the end of this, Kevin's prepared. He has some talking points, but I don't necessarily think it went as well as he was hoping it would have gone. That's what I would think.
So to that point, I'm going to ask you this question in a different way, because I agree with you. And that's where I said it's easy for me to say, ride the balance of tell fans what's happening without, like I said, giving away trade information to GMs on the outside, like trying to I've always said this, Kevin Cheveldayoff keeps his cards so close to his vest. They're in the inside pocket of the vest, right?
Yeah.
So I get that.
He can't see his cards anymore.
Okay. I understand the idea that there's only so much you can say. I also understand the idea, Ken, that if you get into and I think there's a way to do it. The Rick Bowness model is like, I haven't been good enough. I haven't prepared these players for games. They're getting slow starts. That's on me. That's the coach's job. You used to have all these clear moments of he would define the roles, and this role, this isn't working. And there's a role that exists to make sure that works. And because it's not working, the person in charge of that role is not getting their job done. I'm in charge of that role, so put that on me. But he would also say at times, hey, Mark Scheifele's got to be better, and no one knows it better than Mark Scheifele, right?
Right.
Accountability. I'm going to say out loud, this isn't working, and I'm going to hold that person accountable, and I'm okay doing it because I've talked to this person and they know I think that they should be more accountable, and I'm not telling them anything that they don't know. And let's be honest, all you people out there, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. So there's that balance to ride without saying it's all these people's fault. It's all these people's fault. But let's just say this, Ken, because you talked about the idea that there's only so much he can say. He can't give away the plan. He can't throw people under the bus. Then let's look at this from a different perspective. You're Kevin Cheveldayoff. You're walking out in front of the media. You're talking to a fan base, which, as I've touched on, it's important right now. It's important to connect with your fans because you don't want to lose your fans. You can see they're frustrated. You can see it in our chat room. You can see it in the conversations online. I'm sure you can hear. You can see it in the bag on the head of the guy in the crowd in Ottawa, that the fans are frustrated. So I'll say this. I'll twist it and ask it for you in a different way. What value did Kevin Cheveldayoff provide the fans of the Winnipeg Jets Hockey Club today with that availability?
Yeah, I mean, I think that most people wanted to hear more, and that's your entire point here, Sean. And I totally get it. I think that the Jets are going to have some uncomfortable conversations coming up in the next month or so with some veteran players, and like I wrote, some of those conversations might be having those with players who want to stay in Winnipeg and who are planning to put roots down and want to be part of the solution, but they may not have the opportunity to do so. So again, I'm not saying it's cart before horse, but I think that the Jets are in a point where, I think they know where they are. I don't think that they're ready to punt on the season, and I don't think any fans expected them to say that today. And if they did, I mean, the only team that basically has said they're playing for next season this year are the Vancouver Canucks, and they responded by trading their captain, by going actually on a little bit of a winning streak. So I don't think the Jets are there yet, but again, they're very close to having to make tough decisions, and that's going to be part of what's ahead. And Sean, the other part of it too, I mean, we've seen the reports from Elliot Friedman, our colleague and friend, about the Jets kicking around on scoring. I mean, this goes deeper into our conversation that we had on the weekend. The reason the Jets are looking at his scoring, they're not looking for rentals. They're looking for guys that have term and can help retool the roster, even if they have a top 3 pick in the draft, which again, as we talked about on the weekend, is probably where they need to be in order to sort of steer the ship after the complete 180 that's happening out on the ice itself. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you 100%. I think it's a missed opportunity, but the issue is, and even though people want to hear from him more, and we talk about transparency all the time, I would imagine Kevin Cheveldayoff is going to do his intermission interview on the broadcast tomorrow. That's usually what he does after he speaks to the greater, the larger media. And I think you might hear a little bit more in that, even though I'm not expecting him to completely reverse course from what we saw today. But I think with the benefit of having 24 hours or more to soak in what happened today, be a little bit more worth those issues. Maybe he won't, and we'll see.
I mean, I don't know. There's. I mean, you would hope
my
so,
point,
Ken.
And just say, hey, that went. Why don't we tomorrow morning?
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, Ken, but I think the gist of what you were talking about came through there. I would hope that happens. If he's having that conversation, he's going to have that conversation with Sarah Orlesky. Sarah Orlesky is extremely talented at what she does, so I'm sure she's going to make sure that she takes it into a place where it's of value to fans. I still think it's a massively missed opportunity because Sarah, you're getting it on the broadcast. It's a friendly place. We had our conversations in years past about how the organization handled the fan issue. My thoughts on that. I thought they ran to a safe space, to people who weren't going to challenge them on the things that were being said. And I think that affected fans. Like the whole point of that conversation was you wanted fans to come back into the building, and yet you went and took that conversation to a place where your side wouldn't be challenged and fans' voices wouldn't be heard. And that wasn't the way to handle things. I think it took a while for them to come back and rectify that situation with the fans. I think they're getting there. And you'd hope that they would have learned from that moment that there's times where you just need to take your medicine. You need to swallow and go like that. And there's a conversation here with Alex99 says, I don't know if I need to yell louder than I'm yelling already, but he says, what do you want Chevy to say? Players 1, 2, and 3 are crap. I mean, how much clearer can I say? There's a way to be accountable and direct and talk about the truth without going into a situation like this. And you need look no further than the example that you're clearly ignoring right now of the conversation that we had about Rick Bowness, who walked in here and said the truth at every single turn, and the organization benefited from it. You want to know when Rick Bowness said something very similar to this? He said it when the Jets got bounced from the playoffs in a year that they fell from 1st to 8th in a short amount of time. And then what did they do? They came back better, and they came back better again. So I don't know, Alex, like maybe you want to just walk away from this and say, let's just say nothing. That's a great idea. Let's just keep going on and saying nothing because you don't want to hurt anyone's feelings and you sure don't want to hold anyone accountable. Or you can do what made this organization the beast of an organization it was for the last 3 years and just say the honest thing that people can understand. Like, you know what was not discussed at all today out of the general manager's mouth was depth scoring. Who doesn't understand that depth scoring is a massive nuclear problem on this team. It's nuclear to the degree that it feels like there was a nuclear attack in the bottom nine, and it's nuclear winter down there. Nothing is alive when it comes to secondary scoring here. But that doesn't become part of the situation. The solution to that doesn't become part of the situation. To me, fine. Alex, okay, let's just all be really nice. Let's all put on the kid gloves and make sure that no one walks away from this feeling like they need to do anything more than they're doing right now and just continue sitting in last place. I think that's a great tact, a great strategy.
No, but the one thing that we have to remember, and we talked about it a ton at the time, Rick was a little bit more overtly bold than most people because Rick knew it was his last job. So, and again, I'm with you. I would love to hear this from all 32 coaches and all 32 general managers, but it's still, I would say it's in the minority of them that are acting that way, not in terms of accountability, but in terms of the bluntness that we heard from Rick Bowness.
I wonder if there's. I
wonder, you agree, though? I mean, I'm not saying it's only the answer, but I think that was part of it. You don't think so? I mean, Rick himself said it.
Hey,
Rick said it out loud.
So Ken,
do it because
I say no because I covered Rick Bowness when he went to the Stanley Cup final in the bubble, and he did the exact same thing when he was there, and that was his first opportunity to be a head coach, and that happened by accident. And then he took a team to the Stanley Cup final, and he did it doing that. And the other part about this, Ken, is
he got replaced.
He got replaced
right after.
And then. Okay, but so Ken, are we doing our job, or are we trying to survive our jobs?
No, and again, that's totally fair. But I'm just saying it wasn't a roadmap to longevity or ultimately success for him. It was successful that he got there,
which is what's admirable because it's a guy who went out and did what he thought was right, regardless of what the costs of doing that were.
For sure, and we agree with that. But it just hasn't been a roadmap that a lot of teams adopt or a lot of coaches adopt.
I would say this. Ask any player who's played with Rick Bowness before. They'll say that's been Rick Bowness his entire career. And you know what? It probably did cost him opportunities at being a head coach for a long time. And it's probably one of the reasons why he spent the most time on an NHL bench out of any coach out there, other than but he spent a good chunk of that as an assistant coach. But I guess, Ken, my counter to that would be it worked here in Winnipeg. It worked. It's what turned this team into what they were. Part of their superpower was their system, a system that everyone was accountable to. And again, I'm not bringing this up as a criticism of Scott Arniel. I'm not saying things have changed in that way. You know my thoughts on the roster and how I think that's affect the team's ability to do what they're doing. But if there wasn't a clear indication that accountability and bluntness and talking about the problem and dragging it out into the spotlight and saying, it's okay, this is the boogeyman, we're not going to avert our eyes, we're going to look at it and we're going to take him down. If there wasn't an understanding that works in this organization, that they wouldn't learn from it, I don't know how much more clear it could have possibly become. Anyways, I think what we should get into is we should glean some of the topics that were happened, his answers to them, and what you can take away from them. So let's start.
You direct. Yep.
Okay, so let's start.
I have one for you quickly. Sorry, sure. It's not a key talking point because he's not playing. What was your take on Chaz Lucius? Because the words, when I read them, I see people going crazy. In the context of what I'm reading, I don't think Kevin Cheveldayoff was blaming Chaz Lucius. I think he was pointing out that one of their first round picks had to retire far too early, but I didn't get the sense he was blaming him by any stretch of the imagination. Was it different in the room, or why are people going so wild?
I think people are going wild because they think that was a way of now, not that he's blaming Chaz Lucius, and somewhere it's like, Chaz, what the heck? But I think it's that people feel he's leaning too into the idea of losing that one guy, and that means everything. So like, we're on the drafting thing. And let me say this. I thought the most revealing that Kevin Cheveldayoff was in that question that was asked, and I thought it was the most revealing answer that he gave about the idea of how many guys they've graduated out of the system, and I thought it was the closest he came to bluntly saying it's not acceptable, it's not enough. And I took from that, so if we're going to read between the lines, and I love the comment someone posted in here. In an avail like this, I think one of the points I'm making is we shouldn't have to read between the lines, Ken. This should have been a very direct conversation with the media and the fan base, so people were very clear. It shouldn't have to be like, well, he said this, and I'm going to interpret it as him saying this or him hinting at this. But that's where we are. That's what we have to do. My takeaway was that there was an understanding that it's been said within the organization, it's been identified in the organization that this is not good enough. Our draft record is not good enough. Right. Let's just be honest here. One of the things he did hold himself accountable for was the idea that in their effort to win now, they've sent a lot of draft picks out the window. And what that means is your scouting staff has less opportunities to hit. Okay. So now it looks that much worse. Yeah, we haven't hit. And you may want to go say, clear out the scouts. They're not doing their job. But the scouts haven't had the ability to take swings or do certain things that they've done in the past because they're in win now and they're sending those opportunities to make a difference within the organization out. So I thought there was accountability there from Kevin Cheveldayoff. But I also felt, Ken, and I wanted your takeaway from it. I don't know if you heard his voice. Maybe it was in what he was saying, but I felt that I heard, especially with the idea that the Winnipeg Jets are heading to a place where a top 5 pick looks very possible for the Winnipeg Jets, the way things are going right now, that was kind of a shot across the bow for him within the organization, saying it's not good enough. It has to be better, and we'll do something to make it better.
Right. In terms of drafting, you mean?
No, in terms of the people whose job it is to start hitting, this needs to get done. Like this, to me, if I was a scout listening to this, if I was part of the scouting staff, I feel like I got put on alert today. It's better. It's got to get better or changes will be made. I don't know if you heard the same thing.
Like pro side and amateur, you mean?
I think more amateur.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
And I agree. I mean, hey, I think they're going to have to change the way they're drafting in some regards. I mean, the Kevin, he was was in the 4th round, was a pure speed guy that was scoring, right? So, much like the offseason moves were, veteran guys who were slower than what they had previously. I think that could apply to some, the Jets have taken some guys who have dropped in the draft, and God, with Kyle Connor, it was an absolute grand slam, right? So, but yeah, I mean, I think that it's chicken and egg on the drafting side because of what you mentioned, right? I mean, the Jets know that with only 2 guys in the lineup from the draft and develop program in the last, I think close to 10 years now with Samberg and Perfetti, that's not enough. This team can't survive that way. They need to integrate more players in, whether that's Braden Yager coming or whether it's Lambert eventually if he sticks around, or Chibrikov, or on the back end we know Solomonson obviously. But there have to be more hits, and there have to be more guys that become NHLers, because the list that Connor Rabchuk also included of Jets draft picks that have played more than 100 games includes 2 players that were drafted by the Jets and lost on waivers, in Declan Chisholm and Johnny Kovacevic. So fans look at that and say, oh, well, what if the 3rd pairing was Kovacevic or Chisholm with Logan Stanley, right? So, yeah, I mean, this is simple. I mean, we know this. We know the draft is incredibly difficult. There's some needle in a haystack to it. We know, things are changing, but you got to hit more. The Jets have to hit more. In the early years, it wasn't just their first rounders that integrated, Sean. The best goalie, or one of the best goalies in the NHL, who is the reigning Hart Trophy winner, is a 5th round draft pick. So it's not just about trading away 1st round draft picks when you're in win now mode. In those years, you got to hit later on, whether it's 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round, 6th round, 7th round, because that's the lifeblood of the organization. Kevin, like you said, that was the answer that he probably hit the most on.
Yeah.
And Sean, part of the issue, I mean, now that's why the Jets have to recoup some of those lost draft picks, because of the deals made for Brandon Tanev and Luke Schenn. I mean, they don't have a second in either of the next 2 drafts at a time when they need to be adding young players into the system. And Sean, the bigger part about this is that if the Jets stay in the bottom 5, that second rounder for Schenn is going to be somewhere between 33 and 36. Like, that's essentially a second first round pick for a team that is bereft of them in the lineup.
Yes.
So, again, I'm not saying the Jets are going to be able to get a 33rd to 37th round pick back, but that's definitely a factor. I mean, they need guys internally that they have to hit, but they're also going to need to do a better job. And again, this isn't just one or two picks. Christian Vesalainen, with it's apropos with Vegas coming into town, Sean, right? Because Vegas coming into town is a reminder of trading down to keep Toby Enstrom to get Christian Vesalainen at a time when Nick Suzuki was available with the pick the Jets had previously. And again, this isn't revisionist history, and we don't know the Jets list, but the conversations that are taking place today are a lot different if the top two centers on the Jets are Mark Scheifele and Nick Suzuki.
Oh God.
Right.
Yeah.
And
no doubt.
Guess what? Kevin Cheveldayoff is fully aware of that. And I'm sure it stings for him, but he can't spend 8 years lamenting. He's got to find the replacement for what that could have been. Right. So,
I just wanted to tackle this quickly. Stoon Norm G says Chevy was talking to protect his job, not writing his own dismissal letter for Chipman. I wanted to clarify this and frame this. This has been part of media conversations that have happened with Mark Chipman for a long time here now. Mark Chipman, okay, I'm going to say this from my side. Kevin Cheveldayoff isn't, a smooth, slick talking car salesman who has somehow avoided the landmines of his career the last 15 years and found a way to stay with the organization. Kevin Cheveldayoff has stayed here with an owner and Mark Chipman behind him, who said this clearly. I believe in you. I've seen enough from you that I think that you can get us to special places. And I've seen enough from you that when things fall apart, that I think you can get us back. And I don't believe in expiry dates on coaches. I don't believe in expiry dates on GMs. I think that you show faith in your people and your people will reward you. So this idea that Kevin Cheveldayoff, this to me is why it's even that much more criminal that Kevin Cheveldayoff doesn't have an open conversation with fans, Ken, is because he's not in the situation that Stoon suggests here. He's not in front of the microphone worried he's going to slip up and say, maybe I shouldn't have signed this guy, and that Mark Chipman's ears are going to pop up and be like, well, maybe I should fire this guy. We know that's not happening. So he is in a situation where he does not need to talk around this. He can talk directly because he's got the full faith of the organization and his owner behind him. So that's, to me, I just wanted to bring that into the conversation for the idea that there's that much more reason for Kevin Cheveldayoff to talk honestly and openly with the fan base, because he's not playing a game with his owner where he needs to worry about the wrong impression falling on the owner and the owner acting with a hot head and getting him out of there. Kevin Cheveldayoff has an owner behind him that may not be happy about where they are now, but truly believes that the person who can solve this, whether he does by the end of the year or next year or the year after, is Kevin Cheveldayoff. So because of that, because he's not walking a tightrope, because he's walking on stable ground, I think it would be that much easier for him to be open and honest with the fan base. And that's why I think it's even that much more problematic that he was not open and honest with the fan base. Okay, moving on to some different things here. His response to not making trades so far, Ken, what was your takeaway?
Yeah, my takeaway is that there aren't a ton of willing participants, and the players that he'd like to move, or it'd be open to moving, I should say more aptly, are not in demand. Quite frankly. So
this is actually one area where I think, to the point of Alex saying, well, what are you going to say, this or this? I think he actually gave the full answer to this one, to your point, that, and he also brought that up at that time, that they don't necessarily have the assets to make some of the trades that they would like to make, because, as he mentioned and was really clear about, they've been in win now mode and they've moved a lot of those picks out, and it's making it harder and harder to make trades now.
Yeah, for sure. And it's which aisle are you shopping in, right? I mean, We know that one of the things that annoys coaches and general managers, and I know that it falls into Kevin Cheveldayoff's line of thinking also, and Scott O'Neill's. He was open in saying it. I mean, those guys don't like the talk of competitive windows, and folks like you and I are often trying to predict how wide is it open, is it slammed shut, and all of these things. And that applies to the players. Like one year, this player is incredibly valuable, and he's certainly valuable to certain teams that don't check. And then the next year they go into a 15, 20, 25, 28 game goalless drought, and they're not carrying the same value, even if you would be willing to trade a guy with term. But again, that we also know what happens around deadline time, Sean, is that some of those players pump their value back up. And I mean, again, I'm not saying the Jets are looking to move Vlad Namestnikov. He's been a very versatile player for them, and he's in a huge slump right now. But if the Jets don't turn it around, oddly enough, a team where he came to the Jets from, even though it was only a paper transaction, I think a team like the San Jose Sharks could see great value in someone like Vlad Namestnikov, who can play on the fourth line, be a winger, be a centerman, be on the second power play, be on the second penalty kill, give you 9 to 15 minutes, depending on role and all of those things. So, but right now the Jets are in the situation where a bunch of the guys that could have value as expiring contracts and things like that, could have experience, could have playoff experience, could have Stanley Cup rings. They need to boost their value up in the next month, which is why I think is part of the reason why folks are saying, oh, why aren't you waiving that guy? Well, I think the Jets, because they have to recoup some of those assets, would rather try to trade some of those assets. But I also get that, people can argue and say that after half a year, maybe they've had enough time to show that they're going to turn it around. And I'm okay with that line of thinking, but it doesn't eliminate the problem if you're not able to recoup some of the assets, whether it's by trading a B prospect or a guy who's a veteran who's been in the league for a long time.
So I want to be clear about something on here. Is like I believe that the error, and you've heard me say it before, the error made by Kevin Cheveldayoff and his staff is that they jettisoned too much of their organizational speed. And we'll go through the list again: Ehlers, Appleton, Tanev, Kupari, AJF. Even though that's 5 extremely fast players in your organization that are now gone, and you replace them with older, more experienced players, right? And I think that that's what's affected them. So I think the critical error, I said it on the last show, if you have to pin it down to one person, I think it starts with the offseason that Kevin Cheveldayoff had. But all that said, how they've handled it since, like, I know there's a lot of people who are critical. You didn't make a trade. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. I don't know that the Winnipeg Jets, like the way that he's talked about handling this, I don't know how much they've had in the way of options. Like, are you going to take and throw what's left of your draft picks out down the road to try and bring someone else and hope that this fixes it when your bottom 9 aren't scoring? How many guys do you have to go get to stave that off? How much has to go out the window to do that? He said that today, Ken, he's clearly very like he understands that they've sent a lot of their assets out the window. So I think he was pretty honest about that. And I guess I just got to say, like, at this stage where they are, and some people are saying it, for God's sakes, don't go sell your futures now to try and save this team. I do think that the way Kevin Cheveldayoff has responded to it, I don't necessarily think he's done poorly, and that there was a lot of other options than to say, we've put this team together, we have to have faith in it, until they're at a point where that faith hasn't paid off. But you don't really have a lot of other options. And now what's the best thing to do? I squarely believe, Ken, the best thing to do is to continue on the path they're on and get the kind of pick at the end, because you know how I feel about this. I said it on New Year's and I still believe it. Like, I'm sold on this. The Winnipeg Jets are not making the playoffs. So why fight your way out of the basement and get away from picking Stenberg or McKenna or Verhoff or Carrolls or whatever? So I just want to make it clear when I like what the conversation that Kevin Cheveldayoff had today. I don't necessarily disagree outside of what happened in the offseason with the job that he's done. I kind of think they've had to go down this road as it is. I think there's going to be more that needs to be done. And there's future shows, Ken. We're going to talk about some of the swings that I think could potentially be made. That's a different conversation for a different time. But I don't want to get on here and be like everything Kevin Cheveldayoff does is bad. I don't like the press conference today. I don't like the inability to reach out to fans, but I did think he was honest in saying we don't have trade capital. And I think the unspoken thing here is that at this stage, does it make that much sense to get out of the position that we're in right now? Because it probably sets us up best for the future. And though he wouldn't say it today, Ken, I think they are setting up for the future.
Right.
Call-ups. Oh, sorry.
If it goes until the deadline, there'll still be plenty of time to play prospects if that's, obviously the way that it goes in the next, 4 to 6 weeks between the Olympic break.
I've got a 10-minute deadline here, Ken. So call-ups. This was a strange one because when he was asked about call-ups, his suggestion was he pointed to Elias Solomonson, and then he said something that I thought was just a little off the wall, and he said they haven't had opportunities to call guys up. That just seemed really, really strange to me. I'm just going to say this before you take it. I think he actually answered himself later in how the Moose organization is doing. And I know there's going to be people who are going to pick this apart. They're going to say, could be this guy, could be this guy, could be this guy. But he did say out loud the idea that you don't want, it can be disastrous to bring a guy up too early and wreck him. When you're last place in the NHL, the expectations go way up on the player being brought in, and the degree of difficulty goes way up. I think he answered his own question there that the Jets aren't bringing guys up because they're worried about bringing guys up too early in a bad situation and ruining them. What did you take away?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think the other part, and again, Kevin didn't want to be, at a time when the NHL team is struggling. I don't know that Kevin wants to be up on the microphone, dropping truth bombs about how Brad Lambert or Nikita Chibrikov are playing or occasionally playing. But I think at the same time, I think I'm with you. I think it was an initial fumble, but one that he tried to correct a little bit later on. But again, as we've talked about, Walker Duehr isn't going to be the singular solution to the Jets' problems, but he might be able to help the fourth line. So if you're looking for incremental growth, I think that those players still need to know that opportunity exists for them. So again, I think that is part of it. And you know how I feel about Elias Solomonson. I mean, I want to see him playing. In my personal view, I'd prefer to see 40 than 20, but he needs to get at least 20 to 25 games of NHL experience to ease the transition for next year when he's a full-timer.
I want to move on to his take on the fans. A lot of fans had a problem with that. And what he said, and this is something I should say out loud, his take on fans, that true hockey fans, and I know that this rubs some people the wrong way, and I know that, hey, Ken, I've taken some bullets for my take on this. I said,
I've heard this recently. This recently on the show.
I 100% agree with Kevin Cheveldayoff's take on this, that, if you're a real hockey fan, you're there for the ups, you're there for the downs, you're there for the celebrations, you're there for the heartaches and all those kind of things. But again, to belabor the point I said earlier in the show, that doesn't mean, in my opinion, that you've got a blank check with fans that show up or you're not a true hockey fan. I know some people took it that way. And I think to avoid making people feel that way or avoid people reacting to you and feeling that way that's why it was important today that he was honest with fans, upfront with fans, reached out to fans, brought them into it. It's one thing to say that true fans show up regardless. It's another thing to say we value true fans and we're going to show you that value by keeping you in this conversation as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, and that's fair. And it's interesting too. You need there's a lot of cherry picking that I saw online, and I get it. It was part of the conversation, but I think in the greater context, I mean, Kevin Cheveldayoff used one of his classic lines. It's the kind of the passion, not that pays the bills, but the passion that around the Jets is what makes them kind of like the Green Bay Packers. It's the little engine that could. It's you can't say that about our players, but we can as fans. So I think that he was expressive in that he gets it. there's a lot of passion, and he also knows that not everyone is super pumped with the job that he is doing right now. So yeah, I mean again, I don't want to tell fans how to, when they show up when you feel like showing up, but also know that there's consequences to that. I mean, those are the realities for, and a lot of those people that are saying that have lived through it already one time. So, and again, I'm not here threatening saying the Jets are gone, but if it's as easy as saying, well, show you don't support this by not attending, well, the only thing that will get accomplished is, eventually the team could eventually move. But that's not to say the fans shouldn't ask for more. They should. That's the whole point. The point is the same for the fans as the general manager. The general manager is not aiming for mediocrity. The Jets didn't come into the season wanting to be a mediocre team that ended up in last place. Their intent was to compete for the Stanley Cup, and they're still in last place. So yeah. Anyways,
I've got 5 minutes, and then I have to go. Your take on the work he's done. So I asked this question. I asked it just basically saying, basically what left the organization and what came in to the organization. I'm trying to remember how I asked it, but basically it was setting the table for saying these guys left, these guys came in. Where are you at on how that worked for you? I thought this was a question, and I go back to what you were saying, Ken. It's one thing to say this starts with me. It's another thing then to say, okay, well, because that's basically what I'm asking. If it starts with you, what's your role in this? I thought he didn't touch this one. I thought he focused on talking about the defense of the whole thing, which to a degree, fairness, was part of the question. But the idea, basically, he's talked about this as being a mindset. I thought that was an opportunity for him to weigh in and say, we tried to do this. This is why we thought it was going to work. It hasn't worked yet. I still believe in it, and I still think we can get there, but so far that hasn't paid off. I thought that was an opportunity to do that, and that's why I take exception with your take on it, that he took accountability in this, because he said the most broad of I'm accountable for this questions, and then showed nothing on why he believes he's accountable.
Yeah, no, fair. I mean, we know this from the summer. Part of the reason Tanner Pearson was brought in was not because he's a fast skater. It's because he won a Stanley Cup with the LA Kings and came from a program that is a winning program, and also spent time in Vegas, which is a winning program. He's playing in a checking role, and there have been times on that Lowry line where he's looked good, but he isn't going to match the production as a double-digit scorer as some of the guys on the way out probably have. Cole Koepke, again, this is kind of one of the confusing ones because he does fit their identity, Sean. Fast and hard to play against. Yes. And for whatever reason, that hasn't been a fit, whether that's usage or just not getting comfortable fast enough. That's a confusing one to me. We knew, and he addressed the Taves thing, we knew it was going to take time, but the problem for the Jets is that they don't have time in terms of how it's been going, in terms of him being at his best in maybe February, March, and April. And again, the other one, we know Luke Shen was brought in for grit and experience and Stanley Cup pedigree. So, I mean, I would have liked to have heard more, but I think that to me, that's more a belief in those players to get playing better, whether that's to enhance the trade value or not. But again, I agree with you. I mean, this was the other part of it. We know that they backfilled a lot of those positions. Not even talking about David Gustafsson. We're talking about Phil DiGiuseppe, Walker Dewar, Sam Fagemo. Like, they brought in guys as insulation that have experience. So if those guys aren't working, I understand why fans are saying, well, if those guys aren't working, try the guys behind them.
Yep. Yeah. I would say this just quickly on Cole Koepke, and this is the conversation that we've been having for a long time. It's one thing to fit that mold, to be fast and this and that, but you have to be able to. The thing that made the Jets great was the way that they executed that system. And so if you're doing it fast and you're putting in the effort, but you're not quite fitting in with, and this isn't blaming Cole Koepke, it's that he's new and the guys around him, he's a little bit different than the last guy that was in there or how the guys have been doing it. And it's one of the reasons why I think quietly one of the most effective things that the Winnipeg Jets have had going for the last little while is that there wasn't a lot of turnover. And that last year, the year that they win the President's Trophy, they basically lost Tyler Toffoli, who never really fit in. And actually, the team seemed to kind of dip a little bit after he came in. And Sean Monahan, that's a big one, but Vladislav Nemestikov had carried that weight before he'd got here. So last year, the Winnipeg Jets went in, started the season 15-1. And why? Well, they all know each other. They all know where this guy plays. They all know that. Cole Koepke, I think, is just one of those things where it's the time that it would typically take for him to fit into the lineup for his line mates to know where he's going to be, how to play off him. Well, he's been in and out of the lineup. So that's hard to learn that when he's not there. And the lineup is constantly changing and they're constantly juggling lines. So it's not easy for guys to be like, hey, Adam Lowry knew exactly where Mason Appleton was going to be, and so did Nino Niederreiter. And Nino Niederreiter knew where Lowry was going to be. Lowry knew where Niederreiter was going to be. That was a strength of the Winnipeg Jets. Some of this is not even just the speed. It's just that turnover for the first time in a long time took a system that was entirely predicated on each guy playing their role to a T, and it pulled at the threads of some of that. So I don't want to say, I'm not trying to say that this is Cole Koepke's part. Cole Koepke, to your point, it's my explanation, Ken, of why Cole Koepke looks like he should fit the system perfectly, and yet it hasn't worked out perfect in practice because fitting him in is a process, and that process ran into an iceberg when this team really had its problems. Ken, if you got anything to say, now's the time. I got to head out the door.
No, fun. Good job getting it up, and thanks for your patience, folks. Tried to get here as soon as we could. I was supposed to be home at 11:15 yesterday morning on a direct flight, and I will be home today at about 1 a.m. if somebody wants to give me a ride home from the airport. But, just kidding. I'll be getting in an Uber, but thanks for joining us. Good stuff.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We're happy that we were able to. We're happy that we were able to make sure that we provided you with some value. We wanted to make this work. We just jammed this in. I got to go. I got to pick up my daughter in a situation here. It's not your typical show, so we didn't unveil things the typical way. But if you appreciate us popping up and doing these things, we would appreciate and that you give a chance to our sponsors. That's Jim Pattison Toyota on Region, Vittorio Rossi, Pristine Roofing, Cambrian Credit Union, Sweet Lou Furlan, Flame and Comfort, Myers Drugs, the Johnston Group, and the people at the Keg. Thank you very much, people, for tuning in. We'll do this all over again in a little bit of a different fashion, back to the regular post-game shows tomorrow when the Winnipeg Jets take on the Vegas Golden Knights. We'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.